Episode 13, which is unlucky for some, but not us today because we have Nick Buchan joining us on Spilling the Tea podcast. Nick is a golf-specific strength and conditioning coach. We're going to say S&C probably most of this. So S&C is strength and conditioning. Currently working with a lot of good Kent players, a lot of pros around the world, and also the Kent Golf College. I've worked with Nick in the past when I thought I could play. Knowledge is incredible, and I'm hoping that you're going to pass some of it on to us today. Do you want to start by giving us a little bit of background where it all started for you? And then we'll get into some questions that might help some people around this podcast.
Yeah, sounds good, George. Well, thank you for the intro. That was that made me sound quite good for a second. But yeah, okay. Right, brief origin story. Started playing golf as a kid. Turned pro sort of 19-ish.
That's a good
ran out,
right now.
ran out a little bit like yourself, right? Ran out very quickly realised I ain't good enough and I have no money left. So retirement came, very, very quickly. From there, did the AGMS degree at Birmingham and sort of at that point in time, to be frank, absolutely hated golf. So filled the competitive bit with powerlifting. So kind of did stuff at the gym and that kind of stuff. So I wasn't playing golf at all. I was working as an S&C coach post the HMS degree, just general, just sort of any sport that walked through the door. And kind of a couple of things happened. One, I started playing a little bit. I remember the first round, I hit a golf ball for like 3 years, and I turned pro probably. Trackman didn't exist then because I'm old. So I turned pro, probably hitting it 270, swinging it 108, 107, that, it was a few years ago, but still not good enough at that point, and I just couldn't hit enough greens. I'd done nothing. I didn't play golf. Literally didn't hit a ball for 3 years. Did nothing but became very, very strong. I played around the golf. I hit a 7-hole in the local course. I hit a 9-iron into 490-yard par 5. Made eagle. I was like, this is quite. I couldn't putt. Obviously, scored terrible because I haven't hit golf balls for 3 years. But I was like, oh, damn, this is a good idea. Should have done this a long time ago. I was hitting 310, 300, probably swinging it just shy of 120 at that point. And literally, I hadn't got technically better. I'd got so much technical because I hadn't hit golf before. It was literally just strength and power. And at the same time, TPI was kind of gathering pace and becoming a thing. And it was like, oh, I know something about golf. I know something about S&C. Maybe I could do this. Just started. So my S&C job at the time was part-time, just filled the rest of the hours. Writing stuff on the internet, basically, and the business kind of grew from there. I ended up writing some stuff for TPI, ended up with a few sort of online clients, and have been doing this good golf exclusively full time 11 years almost now. It's that's the backtrack really. Hopefully
you missed out obviously the star year of your career when I was about and knocking about in
that was to be fair, that was good because we had a good group of players, right? We had we had some group sessions going on that were good fun. That was probably as far as the amount of good players we had around, that was a strong it was a strong couple of years for sure.
I think I made it good, but it is what it is. I don't like to blow my own trumpet.
I think you made it. I think you made it good from a
point of view.
An entertainment and
in a polite way. You put it in a polite way. I think it was just entertaining watching me trying to lift any form of weight. I think
it was. You were
week.
Yeah, well, to be honest, you were a little bit strength deficient. Let's put it that way. You know, but it's a similar thing, right? Yeah, you were probably a little bit underpowered as a golfer, and probably came to the, you know, if you'd have started that side of things at 13, 14 years old and had built a kind of base of, because I don't actually know, I don't know that we ever really talk about this. But I'm guessing you didn't have a huge sort of sporting background outside golf at that time.
No, I did actually. I was
Okay.
I was football till about 14. But
Okay.
I went for a really weird stage when at primary school I was big and quite strong, and
Okay.
moving into secondary school I sort of didn't really grow and got slimmer.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was just said that there was some sort of, you know, the sport specific skills, etc. You know, possibly, you know, even in the football side, I think were strong, but probably some general movement competencies that hadn't been, you know, sort of put in place. Which if they had been at sort of 13, 14, I think you would have coped with the.
Yeah, I would have been on.
You would have had an opportunity to develop the strength and power side of things at 16, 17. And then you're a very different athlete by the time you turn pro, you know. But hey, we've all got the way.
Short, but I was short.
It's easier now though, right? Because now you just play smack ball as hard as you can, go find it, repeat, and it doesn't matter. You know, it's much harder when you have to play percentage golf and care whether it goes in the hole.
It makes it a lot more enjoyable. Just
oh mate,
honestly, every hole bar some par threes, because on some par threes I still need driver, but on every hole it's just driver, and just wherever it goes, I'm just gonna whack it.
Mate, I am terrified of competitive golf to this day. I'm like, I don't want to know what my shot distraction is. I don't want to know what the percentage play on this hole is. I'm just going to whack it. And then when it goes in the trees, I'm going to try and find the smallest possible gap for the most ridiculous hero shot. And I'm going to try that. I'm going to keep trying it. And if I make a 10, I don't care.
Yeah. I played, I can't remember where I played. Played a few weeks back, and I just every hole I just like was hitting driver, and everyone was like, "Why are you hitting driver all the time?" I was like, "Do I want to enjoy this?"
Yeah, I don't think people fully understand what professional golf is. Professional golf is a risk management exercise. I mean, it's boring as hell. Let's be fair.
Yeah, but at the same time, there's a lot more, and we'll probably move on to discussion at some point. But there is a lot more. It's going that way towards hit driver as far as possible, and then work it out from there in terms of the approach shot being a lot more.
Yeah, certainly the data that Decade and Acros and people like that are putting together would probably suggest that for most people, I think 80-20 rule is probably, you know, probably stands up for a lot of things in life. An 80-20 rule is probably is a case of hit driver 80% of the time for 80% of the people, and that is the right answer.
Yeah, exactly that. And by the way, that includes par threes. So the 20 par threes.
Yeah, possibly.
Right, I'm going to get on to a serious question now. So you've worked with some really good guys in the game. What are the best players in the world doing when it comes to strength and conditioning?
Yeah, I need to make a video about this, right? Because so the basic answer is, so if you go and, you know, see guys training, see pros training, you see the odd clip and whatever, generally they're training well. And let's say generally the European guys train better than the American guys. It's just my picture about it. If they're training well, generally you will see a couple of things. They're a lot stronger than you probably think they are. And you will see basic compound lifts squats, bench press, deadlift, get stronger over time. And then you will see jumps and throws possibly supersetted with that are linear, that are not particularly rotation generally. What you won't see is what you will see if you type in golf fitness on Instagram, which is some kind of weird mobility drill or some kind of perfectly fine mobility drill in which we've added some random unnecessary rotation to make it look like a golf swing. And so I don't know, how detailed an answer do you want? I could get into why that stuff doesn't work.
I would say, let's say, well, you said about obviously the compound lifting. How often?
Really, we don't need to do too much. And one of the things that I get a lot is kind of fitness is only for pros. It's only if you can spend all day in the gym and whatever else. To some extent, the pro guys at the highest level are spending a lot of time in the gym. You've got to understand that a lot of that time is really recovery. So it's prep or recovery, right? They're not actually seeking a training effect in that period of time. They are doing stuff to feel good. Yeah, they're doing stuff that feels good. They're doing stuff to, move a little bit better, to create what we call an acute change. So like a change that might last 10 minutes to get them in a position to go and perform tomorrow. What they're not doing in most of that time is lifting, fitness training, etc., designed to actually change, to make a physiological change, right? To change how muscles fire, to add muscle mass, to increase the force muscle fibers can produce. In order to do that stuff, you probably need a lot less training than you think. A good chunk of my guys will do kind of twice a week, 45 minutes in season. We probably only do one sort of real session a week, and then there'll be some other stuff around that. There'll be some recovery work that might be daily. There'll be a little bit of a priming workout, which is a similar thing. So it's designed to create a training effect. But yeah, the time invested in the stuff you need to be doing to get better. You don't really need to invest a lot of time in that. I always talk about, let's do that. Like, we want it, golf is a skill game, right? So from a training point of view, we want to get in, get what we need, and get out. I don't want you in the gym any longer than you need to be, really, because to a certain extent that goes for pros, but they probably, particularly when they're on the road, it's just about feeling good 90% of the time. Skills already been built, particularly for amateurs that probably have a job and life and other stuff going on. There's a finite amount of time. We want to get you in and out as fast as possible, and any remaining time probably needs to be spent practicing. Like, if I can take your workout from an hour to 45 minutes, still get the same or a better training effect for your goal, and then you can spend 15 minutes working on your driving, putting, chipping, whatever, you're probably a better golfing time than if you just spent an hour.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. I just want to take you back to the what you're talking about in terms of feeling good, because I think there's a question that's on most people's mind when it comes to this. Bicep curls make me feel really good. So can I include that?
Yeah. So I used to be very anti like direct arm work, etc. Primarily because you don't, like, from a strength building, power building point of view, it's not really going to help massively, right? So I've changed my opinion on that hugely for two reasons. One, if it helps you feel good, go for it. As long as you're not killing yourself doing it, like, the sort of, if you type it, if you've done bodybuilding.com or something, bicep curls, I guarantee one of the things you'll see is that like 7-7-7 workout. So you'll do 7 half reps from the bottom to midway, and you do 7 reps from midway to the top, and then you do 7 full reps. Right, that's great. Great muscle building workout. You'll be sore as hell, and you won't be able to extend your elbow. as a result after, right? That's probably not ideal from a, like, because you're, again, what's practice time. If you're doing that, you're going to lose practice time.
Yeah.
Or you're going to lose some availability to practice or play post that workout because you've got to recover. So we don't want to be doing that. If you want to add, a couple of sets of 10 bicep curls that are heavy-ish, but not crazy, like heavy-ish, I always joke is a technical term. It's like, it feels relatively difficult, but you're not killing yourself, right? If you want to do a couple of sets of bicep curls in there, because that feels good, that's great. Okay, definitely there. And the other thing, to be frank, is some of the most injured tissues in golfers are wrists and elbows. If I can add muscle mass in those areas, if I can add muscle mass to forearms, biceps, triceps, that kind of stuff, that's going to make those joints more resilient to overuse injury.
Yeah.
Everything involved in overuse injury. Yeah. So I've definitely flipped on that, and we will do. I generally will sort of put it in as like an optional thing at the end of the workout. So if you're feeling good, you've got time and you want to do this, chuck 10 minutes of direct arm work in. No problem, definitely.
So you touched on it a little bit there. The next question was, what could amateurs do in the gym to get better at golf? But obviously, I think pretty much nailed it there with obviously those compound lifts and making.
Yeah. So we can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So we want to get stronger. Best way to do that is those compound multi-joint lifts. So generally, squat, bench, and deadlift. All right. However, squat, bench, and deadlift are relatively complex. Firstly, if you're going to get really good at them, that's the sport of powerlifting. That is a sport in itself. Right? There are technical proficiencies required in that. Those lifts are at a certain point relatively complicated and relatively difficult to do well, which is a long-winded way of saying they might not be the best fit for someone, So I think I used to say to you all the time, right? We probably don't want to stick a barbell on your back because you're not going to handle it that well, right? For most people, a front squat or a Zercher squat is probably going to be a better fit than a back squat, just from the way they move, their competencies in squatting, etc. A trap bar deadlift is a much easier lift to kind of do well and move load than a straight bar deadlift. So we probably want to look at those sorts of. If you have an internal rotation deficit in terms of your shoulder mobility, if your shoulders feel a bit banged up, a bench press where your two hands are fixed, kind of palms down, might not be the best fit. A sort of landmine press where you're pressing like incline, holding the bar on the end, and it's one arm at a time, or a dumbbell press. Something like that might be a better fit there. So just because we're saying squat, bench, dead, there are variations of squat, bench, and deadlift that might be a better fit for you. So that's one. Generally, I would say that I do a trap bar deadlift with golfers. I would say that I do either a Zercher squat or a front squat. And then I do some sort of split squat. Again, that will be front loaded in some way. It might be a goblet squat. It might be a front grip kind of thing again. Might do an RDL if someone moves well. And then we will do a bench press if they're not banged up. If they are in terms of shoulders, elbows, that kind of stuff. If there's a little bit of an issue there, like I said, floor press might be a good option just to reduce the range of motion. So literally think bench press, but on the floor. Now the elbow can't go quite as low, the range of motion is a bit reduced. Or we do dumbbells, or we go into like a landmine press. So pick a variation that might be a little bit easier on your body. And then you want to basically just repeat that exercise time and time again. So where a lot of people go wrong in that is they'll do workouts look a little bit different. They might see an exercise on social media or whatever. I would throw that in to some extent. That's fine, but you need to learn. Lifting is a skill. You need to learn the skills before you can get stronger and before your muscles can grow. You need repetition of an exercise in order to do that. So again, an 80-20 rule might work quite well. 80% of the workout's the same each time, and then I'll stick 20% fluffy stuff at the end that I see on social media. but you want to get stronger over time. A nice way to do that, a couple of easy ways to do that is obviously you could just add load each time. Each time you repeat an exercise, you can do that. Add 4%, something like that each time. That might work, but it will work for a little bit. It tends to be quite tough to do sometimes. A progression I really like is just to use a rep window. So you find a weight that is tough, and you say, I'm going to do that for a certain number of reps. For a lot of people, I think 5 to 7 work quite well. So initially I do that weight for 5, and I might do 2 or 3 sets. Then I'm going to do that weight for 5, but I'm going to add a set. So I do it for 3 or 4 sets. Then I'm going to come back the next time, and I'm going to do 7, but I'm only going to do 2 or 3 sets again. Then I'm going to add my set back in. So if you think about that, so I've gone from, let's say I did 2 sets of 5 and I worked up to 3 sets of 7. I've gone from 10 reps to 21 reps at the same weight over 4 weeks. Then I can come back and take a reasonably big jump in weight, and then so 5K or whatever, 10K, and then you repeat the process again. That, if you're going to be training sort of on your own, if you're going to be training with no assistance from a coach or whatever else, that's a pretty simple, easy way to increase the load over time, and you kind of can't mess up too much. The other thing I like is just a simple 3 to 5 rule. So 3 to 5 reps is generally a good place to be. 3 to 5 exercises repeated again and again is generally a good place to be. 3 to 5 times a week is generally a good place to be. 3 to 5 rule, rep windows to do more over time, or just add load, add 4% a week. Keep those exercises the same. Big compound lifts, but things like trap bar might be a better fit than straight bar deadlift, circular bar, front squat, etc.
Ever since we've worked together, I've never done, previously did, but never done since, anything but trap bar deadlift. I think it's one of those deadlifts are one of those where it is probably one of the most injury prone moves.
No, it's not that it in itself is likely to cause an issue. In terms of, it's not any more likely to injure you than any other exercise per se. Yeah. In fact, lifting in general, like the injury rates are very low. Like there is a study that looks at kind of injury rates across sports. Yoga is like the lowest injury rate, then it's gym-based stuff, and then it gets into actual sports. Part of the reason for that is because they're controlled things, right? Lifting is a controlled environment. Sport things go awry, right? It's a little bit more chaos in that environment. So lifting in general is safe, is really safe. That's where people go wrong with the deadlift is, it's fair to say that a lot of people struggle with straight bar deadlift from the floor. They just don't have the mobility for that last 3, 4, 5 inches. So a very easy thing to do there is just remove it, bring the bar up a little bit. Because that's when you kind of see that, that tailbone tuck under, that butt wink kind of thing. A lot of people just don't quite have the hip flexor to get to a straight bar. The trap bar obviously helps with that because those handles are a little bit higher. We talked about skill. There is an element of skill with the deadlift. So you have to manage the deadlift as opposed to a squat even. And a bench press, but even a back squat. Like, think about that back squat. The bar's center of gravity and your center of gravity are relatively close together. With deadlift, that bar's center of gravity is way out in front of you, relative to your center of gravity. So you have to kind of manage. The skill is managing that difference in center of gravity. If you see a really good deadlifter, they are essentially pulling backwards to initiate that lift. That requires some technical work, Trap bar is great because you stand in the trap bar. So now the bar's center of mass and your center of mass are the same. Makes the lift a lot simpler to execute well. So for those 2 reasons, I would always say trap bar deadlift is going to be a little bit friendlier. It's also going to be easier to lift heavier loads. And the other thing I think with deadlift is because it is relatively risk-free, let's say, or not intimidating. Like bench press to some extent, and certainly a back squat. You put that bar on your back. If you're a beginner lifter, you probably feel a little bit queasy about it. And you kind of therefore don't do a true max. Whereas deadlift is on the floor. It doesn't come up. Nothing is really going to happen. So the main thing that we know in terms of injury risk in lifting is about being progressive. You talk about form, you talk about all that stuff. In reality, that is a very small amount of what is contributing to an injury there. That injury is an overuse injury, really, and it's around you doing too much too soon. And a deadlift, I think, we're talking about golfers, so largely still, we're talking about men. And a deadlift is a lift that allows a male ego to exist, to put it that way. You've seen videos of guys that pick heavy weights. You have some idea of what you think you should do in that lift, and then it also doesn't feel that unsafe to do that. You can put a load of weight on the bar. Nothing bad is it's fine. Nothing bad is going to happen in terms of it intimidating.
Yeah, it's quite interesting on two things that you've said there in terms of like the confidence in being. If I put this in a personal term, I would say I'm little, so my confidence in back squatting or something like that, or in some weight on, is always low. And then on the ego side of it, I had a moment this morning, where there was these two guys next to me, and they were on the leg press machine, the one where you're like laying backwards and pushing the weight.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's got, but the guy was like a god, and like 6'5", absolute machine. He must have been like 3 of me, and he's got like 245 kg on that. And I'm looking at it thinking, and I wanted to go on it after him, but I couldn't. Obviously, there is not a chance in hell I'm ever doing that. But I because of seeing that, my PB went up by 30 kg. Because one, like your ego goes, you cannot be that. Surely you can't be that weak. But secondly, I would never have been confident enough to go, actually, I can do that way. I can do that way. I can do that way. Where sometimes you've got a little bit of both. Is don't let the ego go too far, but at the same time push yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got to be progressive about it. That's a big jump in weight. That's a big jump in weight. Like we probably want to keep that as far as sensible progression over time.
Yeah, probably want to take another 30 kg on top of that.
Yeah, you probably want to take smaller jumps in load. Like I said, from an injury prevention point of view, it is mismanagement of load that is the injury risk, not perfection in form or anything like that. Right? That stuff is actually really, really minimal. Yeah. It is just about being sensible with your progression. But yeah, like there is a.
I think
there's a balance.
Yeah, I think in terms of like when I do it next time, I'm obviously not going to have that progression, but it's the fact that I now know that I can take it to that weight and then go a little bit more, instead of sort of thinking I'm pushing it one way, knowing that actually I can do a little bit more. And people,
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting.
All the people might be like that in the gym.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Like I think so. So one element of that, like I said, we need to be progressive in adding load. The other element is that golfers in general, almost every golfer I've seen, they are quite bad at applying maximal force. Because if you think, it's a theory, I don't have any evidence for this, but my theory is if you think about the nature of golf versus the nature of, say, throwing a javelin, right? There are a lot of similarities between those two things, right? But a javelin thrower wins by throwing it far, right? So he is very used to maximal effort applied on that javelin. Whereas golf, if you think about it, in modern games a little bit, but it's still just a series of sub-maximal efforts.
Yeah.
Right? Very rarely do you do anything at 100% from a force production point of view in golf. So golfers are generally bad and probably not very confident in applying maximal force. All right. One of the ways that we would deal with that, and I would recommend juniors do this, and and if you like, say, if you do feel like there's sort of more in the tank in your lifts, but you're maybe not confident enough to go there. Isometrics are great. So something called an overcoming or a pushing isometric. It basically means you're going to push against an immovable object, right? Easiest way to set that up is just to put the bar in a rack with either underneath the pins so it can't move, or just with a load of weight in the bar so you can't actually move it. You want that about, you can either have it mid-thigh, you can have it knee, you can have it mid-chin if you really wanted to, but usually so the knee height and mid-thigh. And then you can just pull on that bar. It's a movable object, not going to move. You can just pull on that bar as hard as you can. You're going to push down through the ground as hard as you can. You can hold that for like 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. All right. That's just an exercise. If you can do that on force plates or with a crane scale or something, so you can see how hard you're lifting, great, but that's not that practical for most people. But that is just an exercise in creating maximal force. It's just practicing creating maximal force. That'll give you some confidence in what maximal force feels like to then go and apply in some of your lifts. Like I say, golfers are generally bad at that, and that is something that I will do with for the newer lifters at whatever point, and particularly with juniors quite regularly, just to kind of try and develop that skill for almost not for their golf, but for kind of later on down the line in training when we do want to be maximizing those loads in order to maximize strength, right?
Yeah, I think that brings us quite nicely on to, I know you have a calculation for where you'd like to train someone in terms of strength versus strength versus power, was it, or was it strength?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things you can do. So as far as the assessment process we'll go through, I'll try not to make this too complicated. But there's a number of things you can do. One is, so we will compare a counter movement jump, which is straight up, straight down, basically, versus a squat jump, which is like a pause jump. So you'll come down into like into that quarter squat, half squat position that you would jump from, and you'll pause, and then you'll jump up with no rebend. Okay. The difference between those two, you can use to calculate something called an elastic utilization or an eccentric utilization, which is, people kind of get the idea that golf is an elastic thing. You're trying to stretch in order to let go, right? Think about it as a catapult, right? So we can kind of get an idea of how good you are at that, based on that elastic utilization ratio test. From there, we can then say, right, okay, do you need to be better at force production or better at kind of the stretch side of things, right? And if you really want to get into these, we can also consider your golf swing in that, and like how you swing a golf club, and therefore what you need. So, for example, someone like DJ, crazy long wingspan, quite cool. Basically, his power doesn't need to be that elite through the ground. His power just comes from getting his trail arm as far as physically possible. Nice and mobile, big long wingspan, cool, right? So he's more of a sort of catapult guy, whereas John Ram cannot get that kind of separation through some documented mobility restrictions, foot stuff. It's not tall, it's never going to rotate as well. A bit broader across the chest. So that John Ram is probably more of an exploder, lift-off type. Think about a car on the start. Right? There's no pull back there. It's just pure power, right? So you can think about that as far as what does the athlete need, and you can also think about it as far as what is that the athlete's golf swing going to require a bit more of. But we can use that elastic utilization ratio to kind of see how good a job you do elastically. If you're poor elastically, that means we're probably going to look at training a bit more plyometric jump type stuff. If you're good elastically, or we decide that that's, we don't need to work on that quite as much because that's velocity or whatever, then we look at the more explosive side of things, the more power on the start line side of things, and that's strength and power. So then we go, okay, what do you need to develop from do you need to be strong, or which of those kind of two do you need to work on? There's a couple of different ways that we can do that. So at the moment, I take your vertical jump, and we can compare that to what I just described previously in terms of isometric, which is isometric mid-thigh pull. Take your maximum force development there, and we can get something called a dynamic strength index. There's a couple of other ways you could assess that. You could look at your force velocity profile, so how well you're able to jump across different weights, having load. You could also, the European Ford, like gym truck bit, do that slightly different way. They basically just have standards for strength and then standards for power, and they look at your vertical jump performance, and they look at your isometric mid-thigh performance, and they sort of categorize you as level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they compare what level you're basically. Right? I use a DSI to do that. So that DSI score will tell you if you're sort of strength deficient or force deficient. If you come out as strength deficient, guess what? We're going to load you up a little bit. Training's going to be, to talk percentages, it's going to be sort of over 80%, 80 to 90 to 95%.
Compounding.
Depending on your 1RM. And obviously, a lot of people looking at this, a lot of people listening to this will have no idea what their 1RM is. So that sentence applies to slightly more experienced lifters.
Anyone that doesn't know, one rep max as well, from 1 rep max, yeah.
But yeah, anyone that doesn't know that, basically the stuff I said previously is going to apply 3 to 5 reps. Pick a weight that is challenging, do it for 3, 4, 5 reps, then increase the load from it. Right? You don't need to actually know your 1RM. And then anyone that comes out as velocity deficient, we're going to do a little bit more power-based stuff, which is basically lifting light weights fast. We take anywhere from 30 to 70%, let's say, and we sort of, we squat, we deadlift, we jump, whatever we need to do, whatever we want to do with that, but we just move it fast.
Is that normally when you get the bands out as well with it?
Yeah, so at a certain point, we can look at adding bands to that lift as well. So basically, when you're training what we call dynamic effort, which is you're trying to move fast, at a certain point, one of the things that will happen is, say I'm trying to move fast with 50% of my arm let's just use a squat as an example. Right? Actually, let's use a deadlift to sort of understand. So I rip that off the floor, okay? Because it's light and I want to move fast. So I'm moving as fast as I can off the floor, right? However, the bar's got to stop moving. I'm not jumping at this point, right? I'm not doing a ballistic effort thing. That's something that we will do as well. But if we're just doing a dynamic effort, I'm not leaving the ground. Yeah. So I've got to stop that bar at my thighs, right? So the bar's got to accelerate, but it's got to decelerate over the course of that lift, okay? So I'm actually, especially when the load is light, I'm actually only going to apply force over the first little bit of that lift because I also need to slow it down. What the bands will do at that point is basically, as you get to the top of the lift, the band stretches, right? That's going to pull on you. It's going to increase the resistance. It's going to slow the bar down. So it means that you can apply force and accelerate that bar longer at a lighter weight, right? So it just makes those dynamic effort lifts, particularly at lighter weights, slightly more effective. We don't do that right away because there is a timing element to, it adds a slight complexity to the lift as well, and you kind of have to learn that a little bit. So I don't do that with everybody. Generally, don't do it right away. The other thing to probably say on the dynamic effort side of things, kettlebells are great. They fit really nicely in that slot. Just a kettlebell swing would fit really nicely in that slot. Think about what's the heaviest. I tend to like quite heavy swings because we want to get to sort of that 30%, 40% of my deadlift max. But for a lot of people, what's the heaviest kettlebell in the standard commercial gym? Probably 20, 24K, right? That's not a million miles off. A lot of people, I would say the average man walking into the gym is probably going to track my deadlift about 100K. So it's not a million miles off.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that might be a nice, if I need to improve my explosive power, that's probably going to be a nice bit. It's just swinging that 24K kettlebell. And that has other advantages over some of the dynamic effort stuff. as well, and it's just less intimidating and kind of easier to do in a busy gym, right? You find the bar, set up some bands, all that stuff. Yeah, that's probably great, but let's be realistic. When you got 50 minutes after work before you got to get home for kids and dinner and whatever else, that's pick up a kettlebell and swing it a few times is easier, right? Which is actually that's probably worth touching on quickly. Like, so a lot of what I talk about can sound a little bit difficult to do and a little bit sort of removed from people's day to day, because I'm talking about work I do with good golfers, professional athletes, etc. Essentially, let's be honest, can often have too much time on their hands, right? Or certainly their time is being dedicated to this.
I always had the weekends free. I always had the weekends free.
But so that might not be practical for a lot of people. So I would say what I'm describing might be optimal as far as like a train. This would be the ideal, perfect. There isn't such thing as perfect, but this would be what you want to do. But that optimal program is not optimal if you don't do it. Like, the optimal program is the one you stick to, right? That's it's one of the things that, so when I'm working with clients, particularly online, there's a little bit more variance maybe between people that come in. It's like, oh, what's training going to look like? What sort of programming? I don't know. What do you want it to look like? What works for you? That's the bottom line. There's huge variation. And there's certain buckets you want to fill. Like I said, you might want to drive explosive strength, but there's 20 different ways we could do that. And it's about matching that to your physical capabilities, but also just your life, right?
Yeah, 100%. I was wondering when the buckets analogy was coming out, but well done, you got it in there. I've got a question for you, a bit of a fun one. Are you a fan of Bryson's work?
I think Bryson's interesting. So let's start.
On the fence
generally, yes. Right. The issue I have with Bryson is I think that Bryson is a little bit. The mindset is experiment. Did it work? Yes or no? New experiment that might be entirely unrelated to the last. Right. This might sound a little bit sort of out there, but one of the things I talk about is phase shifts versus iteration. To me, Bryson is always looking for this phase shift, which is like the next big jump in performance, and not looking enough at the iteration. How do I get 1% better at the thing I already do? And that's why you see sort of, there's been a couple of crazy transformations. The diet stuff, by the way, utterly ridiculous. Right. So at the time he's posting about all these protein shakes, the dude has a link for you to go and buy that protein shake in his Instagram account, right? Not what he's doing. He's not doing that. He's selling you stuff.
He's racking up 2 million a week at Live anyway.
Yeah, but he ain't stupid, right? He's everything he does. He's a good salesman, right? YouTube channel, everything good salesman. But that said, right? Do I think we're gaining mass in people? Yes. Do I think that trying to smash driver on every hole as far as you can is pretty much the right answer? Yes. There is nuance to that Bryson probably ignored.
Yeah.
And there's a time and a place. So one of the things I find hilarious about that is the stats around his US Open win.
Yeah.
So Bryson goes on the US Open and goes, I'm going to whack this as far as I can. And so that will work. You kind of think that will work in a situation where the fairways are really, really wide.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't work at a US Open, right? Actually, it works really well at the two extremes. When it's really wide and really open, the guy that hits it furthest wins because it's easier to hit wedges into greens and get more makeable birdie putts. If you look at pros approach playing, you look at sort of shot dispersions from short irons to mid irons to long irons, they get worse a lot quicker than you think, right? And they might be the best players in the world, but they are not immaculate with the 7-iron, right? At all. Every pro on earth would much rather, I think it's a John Ram quote, I'd much rather hit pitch away from the rough than an 8-iron from the bell. I'm going to get that closer, right? So when it's wide open, particularly, that's great. And then ironically, for the US Open, when it's really, really narrow, that's great as well. Because if it's so narrow, the rough is so thin that everyone is going to miss the fairway, you might as well be 40 yards past everyone else, right? There is a time maybe somewhere in the middle, where the rough is a bit thinner, and but the guy that's a bit more the Colin Morris Power of the field, who is long enough and the best iron player out there. There's a certain course where he also has an advantage, and therefore someone like Bryson probably needed. So Augusta might fall into that. I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers, but might. That would be a gut feel.
Yeah.
Like maybe we need a slightly different strategy, a slightly more nuanced strategy around there. But on the whole, certainly on the tour, certainly on most PGA Tour venues, that's the right answer. So I think the two things he did there were very good. All right. Then I think there is an awful lot of apologizing. Actually, no. And then I would say that I'm not a golf coach, so bear that in mind. I'll defer to you a little bit. But I actually think some of the swing changes he made around that time, so the sort of more upright left wrist position that's set up and things like that, I think that's genius. Like, I think what he's trying to do is basically say, if I get ridiculously strong and powerful and big, that is where my distance is going to come from. So then actually I can, and then potentially I lengthen my swing as well, and I get more time. Basically I get more time. So golf is an impulse sport. Impulse is force times time. The more force I can apply into the ground for a longer time, that's why a longer swing, higher hands, etc., mean you hit it further. So he's made those changes to hit it further, and then he's kind of gone, because I'm hitting this further now, I can make a couple of changes in my wrist mechanics to basically reduce my degrees of freedom and try and keep the club face square for longer. I think some of the swing changes at that point in time were really, really smart, but I'm not swinging. And then I think there's an awful lot of mythologizing around how he actually achieved that physically, what he did in what space of time, how he did it, etc. I think so. Brighton went at that point in time. He was quite heavy on advertising or crediting the whole Matt stuff with that, and posted a lot of fluffy hypertrophy, single limb, high rep stuff, which we've talked about as that has a time and a place. Adding mass can be useful. Bigger muscle has more potential to produce force, can also be very useful from the injury prevention point of view. Is useful in terms of the physics of a golf swing. Like, so any rotary sport, the more mass you have kind of anchors you a little bit. That's the reason you don't see light with this. Like, if you're going to spin around in a circle really fast with a 10-pound ball now in front of you, being 300 pounds is helpful because it's going to hold you to the floor, right? Like, all of that makes sense. But then, like, I saw there were videos at the time as well of him with Carl Berkshire, and he's able to put a lot of weight on the bar for the sake of a social media clip with Carl Berkshire. The way he was probably training in reality is somewhere in between those two things, right? I've worked with some guys. You don't see this in golf that much generally. So you see it a lot in other sports where they are competitive athletes looking for an advantage. And they either don't want you to post stuff about what they do training wise, or they want you to post slightly misleading stuff in order the competition can't copy it, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know, Bryson.
Yeah.
But there's an element of showmanship and selling you stuff, I think. And there's an element of misdirection. So I don't think what you see is entirely it's the full picture. Let's put it that way. And that's the same for every social media thing you see, right? Any clip I see on Instagram, from a fitness point of view, from a golf swing point of view, from a practice point of view, you can go and criticize that because you have no idea what the context is. and it's just one snapshot. And just with one snapshot, I can criticize that all day. Equally, like that is just one snapshot.
Yeah.
So doesn't represent what they're doing, right? I posted years ago, that sort of iceberg meme of like, here's the tour pro posting, their new swing speed when that was all the sort of rage. And so it's like, basically all you see is them trying to swing driver as hard as they can. It's like, yeah, underneath that, there's a whole host of stuff that probably goes right back to going to bed at 10 o'clock and eating protein and breakfast, right? Like that. That doesn't get posted because it's boring.
100%. There's so much more that goes into it than just what you see on definitely what you see on social media or what you see on TV. That is for sure. Right, Nick, we're going to finish up with one last one that you've definitely covered the whole time here, but let's generalize. We're going to generalize it. So this would be for any golfer, whether they're pro, amateur, whatever they are, beginner, whatever.
Okay.
Top 3 exercises to help golfer. I know you've already covered it there, but
so I'm not going to give a top 3 per se. I'm going to say, right, what do you want from a golf point of view? You probably want to be strong, or stronger. You probably want to be more explosive, and there are certain things you want to be able to do from a mobility standpoint, as far as T-spine rotation, shoulder external rotation, hip rotation, generally in a golf swing. Pelvis movement is a big thing as well. All right. So basically we'll bring out that bucket analogy, right?
Yeah.
So those are your 3 buckets. The best 3 exercises you could do are filling those buckets, right? All right. And then if you want to make it a bit more complicated, go and work out which buckets are full for you as an individual, and which buckets are empty, and they're going to give you your 3 exercises. And then you got, so I want strength exercise, right? Okay, Scott bench deadlift, variations of trap bar deadlift is probably the number 1 for 80% of people. I want an explosive exercise. Let's keep it really simple. Take 50% off the weight off that trap bar deadlift and jump, right? And that'll do that. But like I say, there are a million variations of that kettlebell swings. You probably don't just want to do one exercise. In reality, you could jump in a few different planes of motion and
box jumps, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, jump with different loads. So you're developing sort of explosive power across a few different loads. But drive some trap bar jump, and then we want to go and develop some mobility stuff. If I've got to pick one exercise, there is an exercise, sort of mobility drill called the world's greatest stretch. Do that because it hits the most amount of muscles, possible. I just YouTube the world's greatest stretch, it will come up, but that hits a lot of muscle groups in terms of mobility, flexibility. So if I have to pick 3, let's do that. But in reality, it's not about, and this is kind of goes back to one of the problems of social media. It's not about the exercise, which we'll call a method. It's about the concept or the strategy, right? And it's very hard to put that on social media, so you put the exercise. But really, it's what are you trying to do with that exercise? That is important. And then from there are 1,000 different methods. But the principle, the system is get stronger, get more powerful, increase range of motion where you need it. 3 Ps are a nice way to remember that. I talk about my assessments, the way I frame my assessments. Look at performance, which is kind of scoring average, covered speed, days missed, practice, that kind of stuff. But then the other Ps are pattern. So what does your golf swing look like? The technical improvement required there. Power, so strength and power output, and position. So power is strength, power output. Can you produce force in positions you're going to be in the golf swing? Right, mid-fire ball looks a little bit like golf posture. Can I produce force in that position? Cool. And then position is can I actually get into the position I need to in the golf swing? I think if you pick 3 exercises, you address those 3, get some mobility stuff, maybe some swinging with intent and then a strength and power, it's probably going to be pretty.
Yeah, like that a lot. I've got one last quick question, which I just thought about. What do you see more of? Do you see more shoulder mobility issues or hip mobility issues?
Hip, probably.
Hip,
probably.
So
which is okay. So I can probably, let's talk about that. So I think one of the issues. So it's basically about context again, right? So there was a sort of debate I didn't get involved in because I have a kid and didn't have time on social media, raging about like whether bodybuilding was good for golf.
Right.
Loads of people saying no, it's not. But then I just said building mass is good for golf, right? So is that coach who I respect and is a good, decent coach saying that bodybuilding doesn't work for golf? Is he wrong? No, he's an ex-bodybuilder. Most of his clients are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s with some lifting experience. They're pseudo ex-bodybuilders, right? They're big guys. Does them getting bigger make them better at golf? No, because they're already that bucket is already filled. Does me getting my 16-year-old Kent squad player who can't punch his way out of a paper bag and weighs 55k, does him getting bigger, does that help him? Yes, it's about context. So I think in that case,
the bucket.
Worth remembering. Who do I work with? Basically, yeah. So who do I work with when I answer that question? What am I probably thinking about? I am probably thinking about that 16, 17-year-old elite amateur through to my younger, 25-year-old guys playing pro golf. Hip. Generally weak cores, generally weight is going forward a little bit, obviously probably dumping a little bit into some sort of anterior tilt straight back. I'm gonna lose rotation doing that, right?
Due to growth more than anything.
Due to growth more than anything, yeah. Due to the fact that your limbs are not where your brain thinks they are anymore because you've just grown 2 foot in the last week, right? But then I'm gonna massively make an assumption, but when you answer that question, you're probably thinking about your average golf lesson.
Yeah. Which
is probably slightly older than that, right? Yeah. And probably has a job and sits at a desk too much, and therefore there's a bit of thoracic tilt. But there's a little bit of curvature to that thorax, which is literally. Will people be able to see this? So if I want to externally rotate my shoulder, right? That's that, right? If I then slouch, I've got less external rotation, right? Like it's nothing to do with my shoulder mobility, really. It's just that my thorax and my rib cage are orientating my shoulders down, so I lose external rotation, right? But that's kind of not the point. Like the point there is that's about context, right? In my client base, in the guys I typically work with, it's hip.
Yeah.
For your guys, it's probably shoulder, right? And that's just about probably who can afford golf lessons and who wants to take their fitness a little bit more seriously based on their aspirations, right?
100%. Well, Nick, where can people find you if they want to get in touch or speak with you more about S&C stuff?
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so website is www.strongergolf.co.uk. You can. My email address is on there. There's a couple of contact forms for just asking a question and sign up for coaching and stuff like that. Or other than that, Instagram is probably the best place. So it's Nick_StrongerGolf, but the Stronger Golf doesn't have any of the vowels in it. So,
I'm never finding you. I can't spell.
We'll put a link in there underneath. The worst thing is I do have I don't know what happened. Something happened with my original Instagram account so I ended up doing another Instagram account.
Yeah.
Right? And it wouldn't. So I have Instagram says the @StrongerGolf handle is taken, like spelt properly. And I've taken it. It's mine, but I can't use it. Like Yeah, so it's worse than that, really. But yeah, hopefully you can hopefully the listeners can work that out.
I'm sure everyone is a lot more intelligent than me, so you're in good hands there. You're in good hands. Nick, it's been a pleasure having you on. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you, man.
Your day, and
no worries.
We'll let you get back.
No worries at all. It's been great to chat, man. It's always good fun. And I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers.